What is going on, guys? Welcome back. In this video today we're going to build a professional weather app using Django and Python. So let us get right into it. Now, before we get into the actual tutorial, I would like to mention that this video was sponsored by Codium AI, and I really encourage you to not skip this part because this can be very interesting to you guys and it's completely free. You don't have to pay any money to use what I'm going to show you here. Codium AI is a plugin that you can use in VS Code or JetBrains products, and it writes automated tests for you using an AI. So you can just go, for example, into PyCharm, you can open up the settings, you can go to the plugin section, you can go to the marketplace, you can type Codium, and then you will find Codium AI Meaningful Test, GPT 3.5 and 4 powered. You can install this, and once you have this installed, you can use some basic code or also some complex code. I just prepared this basic class here, shopping cart, and you can write tests automatically for that class. So you can click here on generate tests for the below class after creating an account. So you have this Codium AI plugin in the lower right corner. You can just click on this button here and it starts generating test cases or test functions for your code. In this case now we have a simple shopping cart. We can create an empty cart, we can add items, we can remove items, we can get the total price of the card, we can empty the card, and now based on this code, first of all, it interprets what the code is actually doing, and second of all, it also generates actual test functions, as you can see here. So in the code analysis tab, you can see the class is called shopping cart. It represents a shopping cart. The init method initializes an empty dictionary. So this is clear text. I didn't provide any documentation. It looks at the code, and this is the clear text analysis it provides based on the code. And then the test cases here, I can use them. I can copy all of them. I can request new ones. I can regenerate them. When I copy all of them, I can just go down here, for example, paste them, and now you can see I have test shopping cart with all these functions. And not all of them will probably succeed because my code up here is not perfect. So for example, I think, there you go. What's the problem here? Did not raise a value error. Yeah, because my code does not raise a value error when it should raise a value error. So I can do test-driven design here. I can write tests and then adjust the code accordingly. This is a very impressive tool. You can find out more about them at the link in the description down below. Alright, so a little preview for some motivation up front. This is what we're going to end up with here. We're going to have two text boxes, one for city 1, one for city 2, and we're going to have a button that says compare weather. And now we can either just enter one city to get some information about it, or we can enter a second city as well to get information about two cities simultaneously, side by side, so that we can compare them. And I'm going to just go ahead and start with one. I'm going to enter Vienna, which is my city. And this is the result we get. We get the city name, we get the current temperature, a description of the current temperature, we get an icon, and we also get a 5-day forecast: Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. Today is Thursday, so this is today, this is tomorrow, this is the day after tomorrow, and so on. And for those, we get a temperature range, we get descriptions, and we get an icon here as well. And now I can enter, in addition to Vienna, another city, so maybe something that's somewhere else. So let's go with Sydney, maybe. Compare weather. And we can see here, I also have the information about Sydney. And then I can compare this here side by side, or actually on top of one another. This is what we're going to end up with here today. By the way, for those of you who noticed, before you think that this is a bug in the implementation, the reason why you see Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and not Thursday, Friday, Saturday for Sydney down here is because in Sydney it's already Friday because of the different time zone. If I change this here to Vienna and Berlin, for example, and I compare the weather, you're going to see that here we also have Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Alright, so for this project today, we're going to need two external Python packages, one being obviously Django, the web framework that we're going to use for this project, and the other one being requests, because we're going to get the information about the weather in the different cities from an API. We're going to talk about this here in a second, but for this we're going to open up a command line and we're going to type pip install Django and requests. And once we have this done, what we're going to do is we're going to navigate to the working directory, so to the directory that we want to write our code in. In my case, this is desktop, not designer, desktop, programming, neural 9, Python, and current. Now, here I already have an API key. We're going to talk about this here in a second as well. Ignore it for now. What we're going to do now is we're going to create a new Django project by saying Django-admin, which is what you're going to get after installing Django and restarting your command line. So if you hadn't Django installed, if you didn't have Django installed on your system before, you probably have to install Django. Then you have to close the command line and you have to open it up again. Then you can use the Django-admin command line tool, and here we're going to now say start project, and the project name will be, let's say, weather_project, and then we're going to navigate into that project and we're going to create an application inside of that project. So we're going to say Python. In here we have now a file called manage.py, this one, and since the project is already created, we're not going to use Django admin. We're going to use manage.py to create stuff in the project, to run the project and everything like that. So we're going to say Python manage.py start app, and I'm going to call this weather_app. Quite simple. Once we have this done, what we're going to do is we're going to navigate to OpenWeatherMap.org. Here you're going to create an account. It's all free. You don't have to pay anything. You're going to create an account. You're going to log in, and then you're going to click on your account. Let me just make my camera a bit smaller so that you can see what I'm actually talking about. You're going to click on your account, and you're going to go to My API Keys. Now, I'm not going to do this here because when I click on this, you're going to see my API key. I don't want to show it for this video today. But you just go to My API Keys and you create a new API key. All you have to do is you have to specify some name, and then you're going to get this sequence of characters and numbers that you're going to have to store into a file. So what you want to do once you have this API key is you want to create a new file, in my case API_key, and you just want to have one line of text in there. So I'm going to create now a sample file, let's say API_key2, and here you just want to have in one line the API key, whatever it is. Let's say this is the API key. You just want to save it into a file, and this file will be loaded into the Django application. So let me just increase my camera size again. That is the basic setup here. Now, the first thing we want to do is we want to implement the general functionality of requesting data and taking the data and passing it into a template. The basic idea will be that we're going to have an endpoint in Django in our web application. When we visit that endpoint, we can post on it, we can post data, we can post a city name as you saw in the preview. We're going to get the data from the API, we're going to get certain fields that we're interested in, and then we're going to take this data and we're going to pass it into an HTML template, and in that template, the data will be rendered into the template. So we're going to see then we have this basic HTML structure, and it will be filled with data based on the template. So a little bit to the structure. I don't want to talk too much about the basics of Django. This is not a Django crash course. This is a project, so I'm not going to explain the role of all these different files. But generally, we're going to work mostly in the weather app application here. So this is the project itself with the settings and the URLs. We're going to just link our application here later on. But the main work will be done in the weather app, and the endpoints are defined in the views.py file. So this is where we're going to work. And what we want to do first is we want to import requests, which is the external package that we installed. And we want to also import datetime, which is actually a core Python package. So I'm going to put it up here. I think the conventions are first core Python, then external, and I think it is best practice to maybe care about the length as well. Not sure about this. And what we want to do here is actually we want to have a simple index view or a simple index endpoint. So we're going to say def index, and here we want to say request is going to be a parameter. So we're going to pass a request to that endpoint here. And the first thing we want to do is we want to load the API key. So I'm going to say API_key is going to be open API_key, which is the file now, not the variable name, in reading mode, and read the API key from the file. The important thing is that this should happen in the proper directory. I'm not entirely sure if that is already the case, but if it isn't, we're going to fix that when we encounter this issue. chances are that we have to specify a different path or we have to move this file. We're going to take care of this later on. But we load the API key from the file. In your case, you can also provide it in clear text. So you can just say API key equals and then a string with the API key here. In my case, I load it from a file just so I don't have to show it in the video. And then what we want to do is we want to define the URL, the endpoint of the OpenWeatherMap API that we want to use. So what we're going to do is we're going to say current underscore weather underscore URL, which is going to be the URL that we have to target to get information about now. And then we're going to target a different URL to get information for the forecasts. So we're going to say current weather URL is https://api.openweathermap.org/data/ and now we have to choose the API version. Now for the prepared code, just because I'm used to this version, I use 2.5. I'm going to keep going with 2.5 here. I think 3 is already available. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to use 2.5, and then in the end, I'm going to just try to switch to 3 without changing anything else to see if this produces any problems. Otherwise, we're just going to stick with 2.5. Works for what we want to do. And we're going to say weather question mark q equals, and here we want to have a query. So I'm going to use these curly brackets here, and I'm also going to say and app ID equals, again, curly brackets. So this is some space where we're going to format in some data later on. And then I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to change this to forecast URL. So API openweathermap.org/data, and now instead of weather, we're going to go for one call and then question mark latitude. So question mark lat equals something and lon equals something. So basically coordinates. And then we want to say end exclude equals current, minutely, hourly, or minutely. Probably this was a bad pronunciation. Hourly, alerts, and app ID again for the API key. So I hope I didn't mess this up. Let me just double check with my prepared code. We have the OpenWeatherMap API, data 2.5, weather, the query is a placeholder, the app ID, so the API key is a placeholder, and this one is a little bit more tricky. We have /one call question mark, these coordinates, lat equals lon equals placeholder, and exclude equals current, minutely, hourly, and alerts, and then again the API key. This should work. So those are the two URLs, and now what we're going to do is we're going to check if this is a GET request or a POST request. If this is a POST request, we're going to do something else than if it's a GET request. So we're going to say if request.method equals POST, we're going to do something, otherwise it's going to be GET. We just assume it's going to be GET. And we're going to return here a template. We're going to render a template that we're going to store in a separate template directory. So I'm going to open up here a new directory, templates, and inside of it, we're going to create another directory, weather_app. So in weather app, we have templates. In templates, we have one more time weather app. And here I'm going to create now a simple index.html file. We're going to change this later on. I'm going to leave it like that for now. So you don't actually need anything in here. I'm going to just keep it blank. And we're going to render this file. So what I'm going to say is I'm going to say request and then weather app /index.html. That's that. So this is the case if it's a GET request. We just display this simple index.html file. If it's a POST request, we need to actually do something. We need to actually get some data. We need to actually get weather data and parse it, or actually render it into the template. So what we want to do here is we want to say city1 equals request.post. By the way, for those of you who might be confused now, request and requests up here is a different thing. Request is just a Django request that we get here on this endpoint, and requests with an S in the end, so plural, is a library that we're going to use to send a request to those URLs. This is a different request now. So this is not the external package requests here. We're just getting the request for this endpoint, and we're checking if this is a post request or a get request or something else. And here now we get from the post request the city 1 and the city 2. So, however, what we want to do, as we saw in the preview, is we want to keep the second one optional. So we don't want to require it. And because of that, what we're going to do is we're going to say request get, and then city 2 and none. Basically, try to get it. If it doesn't exist, it's also fine. So in this case, we have to have a city 1. Here we can also have just nothing. So that's that. We get to 2 cities. And then what we want to do is we want to outsource the functionality of the actual weather API request into a separate function. This is not an endpoint now. This is just a function. And we want to call this function fetch weather and forecast. We're going to provide a city. We're going to provide an API key. We're going to provide the current weather URL and a forecast URL. Now, I'm not sure if we have to provide actually a key. This is what I did in the prepared code, but I think that as a constant, this should also work fine. I'm just going to try, and if it's a problem, we're going to see later on. So I'm going to put the key up here, and I'm going to, or actually, let's remove it in the end so that I don't mess up anything else and I don't realize that that's a problem. Okay, so fetch weather and forecast, we're going to pass the city, an API key, and the 2 URLs, which could also be constants actually. So we're going to think about this here. And what we want to do now is we want to get a response. We want to send a request to the API. We're going to get the response, and we want to get certain fields from that response. And we want to take this then and render it into a template. So we're going to say response equals requests. This is now the external package. We're going to send a get request to the current weather URL. We're going to format in 2 values because we have 2 placeholders here, the query and the API key. So we're going to say here format, and we want to have the city and the API key. So the 2 parameters from here. This is just the thing that we get here as a response. We want to get it as a JSON object so that we can treat it like a dictionary in Python. And then we want to have also the coordinates. So what we want to do here is we want to get this JSON object. We want to get this response from the API, and we want to extract certain fields. So from this response here, we're going to extract the coordinates, and we're going to pass those coordinates to the second URL that we're going to use, the forecast URL, and then we have all the information that we want. So I'm going to say here lat and lon is going to be equal to response. In this response, and this is just something I know because I've worked with the API, you can also play around with it if you're wondering why I know what to ask or what fields to access here. This is just the format of the response. When you send a GET request to this URL, you're going to get certain fields in the JSON object. And you can get those fields, for example, you can get from the response coord for coordinates, and you can get lat for lat, and you can get response coordinates lon as well. So, and with those 2 values now, we can send another request. So we're going to call this now forecast underscore response is going to be requests dot get, and now we're sending a request to the forecast URL, and here we format also some stuff into this string lat lon. Then what was the other one we had here, or is it just 3? We just have 3, right? Okay, so it's lat lon and the API key, and then from this we get again the JSON object. And now what we want to do is we want to take this information here and we want to format it in a way that can easily be passed into a template. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say weather underscore data is equal to a dictionary. I'm going to say that the city is still going to be the city. So this is now just a dictionary object that I can pass to the HTML to render the data into the template. And then we have the temperature. Is this how you write it? Yeah. Temperature is going to be a rounded value. So we're going to round the response main So in response, we have a field main, a key value pair main, and then we have temperature. Now, this is as far as I know in Kelvin, so we need to subtract actually 273.15, and then we're going to round this to 2 decimal places. That is that, and then what we want to do is also, again, remember we had the city, we had the temperature, we had the description, and we had an icon representing the current state. So we're going to say here description is going to be response, weather, 0, so index 0, and description. And then finally, the icon will be response, weather, 0, icon. All right, so that is our weather data. And now we're going to also get the forecast. We're going to say daily forecasts equals an empty list for daily data in forecast response daily. And we're going to look at 5 days. So :5 here. We're going to say daily forecasts.append. And now we're going to append to this list dictionaries with forecast information. So we're going to define the dictionaries as follows. The day is going to be datetime.datetime from timestamp daily data dt. So again, remember what we're doing here. We're getting the response. The response is a JSON object. We get the daily key value pair. And then what we do is we get from this daily key value pair, we get the key value pair dt, which has information about the timestamp of this forecast, and then we just do a string format time %a. So this is going to give us, as far as I know or remember, the weekday, right? So this is the first thing that we have here. Then we have a minimum temperature. So this is the range now. We round the minimum temperature, which is in daily data, temperature min. We're going to subtract again 273.15 for the Kelvin. It's going to be in Celsius. If you're American and you want to use Fahrenheit, you got to do the proper conversion here. This is now Celsius, 2 decimal places. I'm going to copy this here now. I'm going to change this to max temperature. And now instead of min, here I'm going to say max. And then we're going to also have the description, daily data, weather, index 0, description. And finally, again, the icon is going to be daily data, weather, index 0, icon. All right, so all of this is just knowing the API, right? This is nothing too fancy. This is not some programming logic. This is just taking the response, the JSON response from the API, knowing which field has what. And this is just the structure of the response. And those are the fields that we are interested in for the project that we saw in the preview, right? So we have daily forecasts, we have the weather data. And now what we want to do as a result of this function is we want to return the weather data and the daily forecasts. So we use this function now to get the information in the index endpoint when we have a post request. And we're going to fetch the information and the forecast, and we're going to render this into the template. So we're going to say here, weather data 1, daily forecasts 1 equals fetch weather and forecast, city 1. City 1 is mandatory, so we're going to have it, or it's required, so we're going to have it. API key, actually this is in capital letters, and then the current weather URL and the forecast URL. So this is just for the first city. Now we're going to check if there is a city 2. If there is a city 2, we're going to copy this and we're going to say weather data 2, daily forecast 2, city 2. And we want to keep everything in one line. What's happening here? Why do I have to press delete so often? There you go. Otherwise, we're going to just set everything to none. So otherwise, we want to say that weather data 2 and daily forecasts 2 are at least existent, but they're set to none. That is the basic idea. And now all we need to do is we need to create a context dictionary. Weather data 1 will be weather data 1. Daily forecasts 1 will be daily forecasts 1. Then we can copy this, paste this, and replace this with a 2. That is a context dictionary. And now all we need to do is we need to copy this. Actually, just messed up the format. There you go. Return render request index HTML. But we also pass the context dictionary. That is our endpoint. This is our code in the views PY. That's actually everything that we're going to need here. So now what we want to do next is we want to implement the actual template that we're rendering here, this index.html file. We're getting all this information, we're passing it to the template, and the role of the template is now to structure it, to display it in some form. So what I'm going to do here actually is I'm going to delete the file again, and I'm going to create it just because PyCharm will then provide me with a default template. So index.html, we have this basic structure here, HTML, head, meta, body, and that's basically it. Nothing too fancy. We're going to change the title to weather app. And what we want to have here now is a form where I can enter the 2 cities and I can press a button that says compare weather or something like that. So I'm going to say form method equals post, and I want to have an input type text. Now, the important thing is that when we choose a name, we need to choose the name that we're actually accessing here in the view. So here we get from the request, from the post request, we get city 1, and if it exists, city 2. This is exactly what we need to pass as a name here, or what we need to specify as a name here, city 1 and city 2. The placeholder is just going to be the same thing, city 1. I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to change this to city 2. And then we also want to have a button type equals submit compare weather. All right. What we're going to need here in order to make this actually work, because of the policy of the cross-site reference policy or something, I don't know exactly what it's called, we need to also pass a CSRF token here. We need to set a CSRF token here, which is going to allow us to actually make this post request. So this is important. And then what we want to do is, if we have some data to display, we want to also display it below this form. So if we just get this endpoint, if we just send a GET request to the endpoint, we will only see that because we have no weather data. But if we do a POST request, we have this weather data that we're passing here as a context, and because of that, we should be able to display it. And how we're going to do that is like this. We're going to say class equals comparison container. These classes are only important because we're going to use CSS later on to design them. We're going to have a comparison container, and in that comparison container, we're going to have 2 city containers. City container. And the reason we're structuring this like that is because it just keeps everything modular, and we don't have to repeat the same thing over and over again. So I'm going to actually just copy this here now. And what we want to do here actually is we want to surround these structures here, or this structure here, we want to surround it with if statements that only show content if we have some weather data available. And also we don't want to actually put the logic in here. We're going to create a second template file, a second HTML file that we're going to include here in those div boxes, because the content of this box and of this box here, or this section and this section here, will actually be the same. It's just going to have different values, but the logic is going to be the same. So first of all, I'm going to say here in curly brackets, this is the templating engine. We're going to say here if weather underscore data 1. So if this data exists, we're going to show this box. We need to use an end if here so that it knows that this if belongs, or that this if covers this section here. And then we can say if weather data 2, then we're going to display this here, end if. Maybe we should indent this for readability. And inside of here, we're going to then include an HTML file. We're going to create it now. We're going to say new HTML file. We want to call this city_weather.html. We're going to delete all of this because we don't need the same structure again. This is just going to be included, so it's not a standalone file. And here I'm going to just say if weather data without any number. This is just a general thing now. We're going to also directly close this if, or actually this is, no, we're not going to close this. Let's close this. So we're going to say if there is weather data, I'm going to just refer now to this weather data. We're going to pass this data as a key value pair from the index HTML. So in here, we're going to put something that will pass the weather data 1 or weather data 2 into this template, and we will just refer to it as weather data. If it exists, we're going to have the following structure. Heading of size 1 will display the weather data.city. Heading of size 2 will show the temperature. You can, of course, feel free to change the design however you like. And then the description will be in a paragraph, weather data.description. And then we want to have, of course, an image. And the image will be the icon. The source of that will be http://openweathermap.org/image/w/ and here we're going to now use double curly brackets to actually get the icon. So it's going to be weatherdata.icon. So this is the field that we get here from the JSON response. Where was it? Down here we get icon and we get icon. This is the field that we're accessing now by saying weatherdata.icon, and this is part of the URL. So we just append this to the URL. This is the base URL, and then we need to specify the precise icon that we're looking for, and it has a data type. It's .png. Let me just make sure I'm not blocking this. No, you can see this. Great. And alternative text will be just the description. So the alternative text will be weatherdata.description. So pretty simple. And if we have also some daily forecasts, actually not double, but single curly brackets, if we have something that is forecast, or actually daily forecast, then we're going to also render those by saying h2 5-day forecasts. We're going to have a section here, which we're going to call, again, for CSS purposes, forecast-container. And in here, we're going to use the templating engine loop capability. So we're going to say for forecast in daily forecasts and for. We're going to say I want to have a div class or a div with class forecast for all of those elements. And in here, I just want to display a heading of size 3, forecast.day, which is going to be the weekday, and then a paragraph with forecast.minimum temperature. We're going to say Celsius here with this icon. Or actually, it's the icon degrees Celsius, not Celsius degree. Then a dash, and then forecast max temperature, and then degrees Celsius again. Then we're going to have the description of the forecast again. So forecast.description. And then finally an image. Source will be again OpenWeatherMap. http openweathermap.org/image/w forecast icon.png, and the alternative will be the description again. Okay, so that's a quite simple structure. Let me just format this properly. There you go. So we have just these two things, and this is now for some weather data and some forecast data. Remember, we have here in the index, we have weather data 1, weather data 2. We're going to just pass all of this into the include statement. So what we want to do here is we want to say in curly brackets, %include weather underscore app slash city underscore weather.html. So we're referring to this HTML file here with, and we pass now weather data equals weather data 1. And then also daily forecasts equals daily forecasts 1. So let me just make sure I didn't mess up the syntax here, but that is how I have it in the prepared code as well. I'm going to now pass it down here, and you can see now why this makes sense to do it like that. I write the code once, I don't have to duplicate it, and here I just change now the 1 to a 2, and here as well. And then I have these two div containers here. Very simple. And I think that's actually it without the styling yet. So I would say let's give it a try before we go into the CSS, because the CSS section will be done quite quickly, and I'm going to tell you why here in a second. But I'm going to just run manage py run server. I'm going to copy, or actually I'm going to just open this directly from here. Does it work? No, actually not. So let's copy this. Oh, actually it did it. It did open it up. Oh, I forgot one thing. This is why it doesn't work yet. Of course, we need to map all of this stuff. So we have now the template, we have the endpoint, but Django doesn't know that we have all these things. So what we need to do is we need to go, first of all, into a file that we don't have yet. We need to go into the weather app directory. We need to create a new Python file, urls.py. And here we need to actually say from Django.urls import path, and from here import views. And we're just going to define URL patterns to be equal to a list. And we're going to specify that the default path, so just the empty path, will be views.index. This is the endpoint, and the name of this endpoint is index. That's one part. Then we also need to go to the settings.py file. Now here we need to install the application. So we need to go to this section, install apps, and we need to put at the end here our weather app. Now I'm not sure, do we need to import anything? I don't think so. So just put your weather app in here. And then we also need to go to the urls.py of the project, so not of the application. And we need to actually put here the following path. The default path will include weather app.urls, and for this, of course, we need to also have include. We need to import this here, and that should now work. So let's restart this. Let's click on this. No such file or directory API key. Makes sense. So now we have to deal with the path. Let me just figure out what the path should be. So where is it actually? It should be... Wouldn't it make sense for it to just be in the same directory? Let me just move this and see if it works. Seems to work. No, it doesn't work. I'm going to just provide the full path for the sake of simplicity here before I mess up something. So users, Flory, desktop, programming, neural 9, Python, current, weather projects. Again, in your case, you can just use a clear text string. It doesn't really matter if you're not recording. Unless, of course, you're running this in production, then don't use a clear text string in your code. Let me just move this back now to the project. Hopefully this works now. Let's open this up. There you go. So it should work if I just compare two cities, Vienna, Berlin. Okay, we have the first problem, get. WSGI request doesn't have get. Where is this? City 2 request.get. I think the problem is that it's not request.get, it's request.post.get. I think that should resolve the issue. So let's see again. Vienna, Berlin, compare weather, and we actually get the data. This is the data. All that's missing now is the styling, the CSS, And I'm going to make this very simple. I'm going to just copy paste it because I'm going to be honest with you. I hate CSS. I hate cascading style sheets. I hate anything that has to do with designing. So obviously I didn't do it myself. We have something called ChatGPT, which is how I generated the styling for this page, for this web application. So I'm going to just copy paste this now. I'm still going to have to explain a couple of things because we need to place the CSS file in a certain directory. We need to load that directory. So what you want to do is you want to go to Weather App and you want to right click, new directory. You want to create a directory called static. In here now, we want to create a new CSS file. So just a new file, style.css. I'm going to copy paste everything here like this. Now I'm going to scroll through this. If you're lucky and I don't forget, you're going to see that there's a link to the code in the description down below. Otherwise, just pause the video and type it from the screen. So we have the body, we have the form, input. I'm not even going to comment on this because I really don't care about CSS. And I think most of you don't either. So this is the cascading style sheet generated by ChatGPT. So this is just a styling. And in order to now use this styling, we need to go into the HTML file, into the index.html file, and we need to include it. And we do that by just going up here and saying %load static. And then we're going to link the style sheet by saying link rel equals style sheet, href equals, and then %static style.css. And I think that's all. I think that's it. I don't think that we need to do anything else, but maybe I'm wrong. So let's restart this. Let's reload this. And now it looks pretty much like the application in the preview. Let's just go with Vienna only. There you go, just Vienna. And now let's go with Vienna and Berlin. There you go. Everything works. So that's it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed it and hope you learned something. If so, let me know by hitting a like button and leaving a comment in the comment section down below. Also, don't forget to check out Codium AI, the sponsor of this video today. And as always, subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell to not miss a single future video for free. Other than that, thank you very much for watching. See you in the next video and bye.